I'm joined now by the co-host of Pod Save America, Dan Pfeiffer. Dan, thanks for joining me again.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm good. So as we get closer and closer to a shutdown, which is going to happen midnight Tuesday night, so late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, I'm curious first and foremost, as we watch this process play out, what does success look like for Democrats who are right now relegated to the minority and don't have a whole lot of power to be able to wield here?
Well, what they want from this is to come out of this with, I think there are a couple. Let's be fair to them. One, I think to show that they understand the threat that Trump poses is one. Two, that they're willing to fight. And three, substantive success means coming to some sort of deal that includes an extension of the premium subsidies for Obamacare, which, absent an extension before the end of this year, 15 million people will see their premiums raised as much, potentially by 80%. And ensuring that whatever deal they go to will not be subject to any of Trump's rescissions or impeachment, meaning that, like, the worst case scenario is they cut a deal and then Trump just sends up a rescission package to undo a bunch of what Congress just passed. And so that is ultimately what I think success looks like. There's a long road between here and there.
So the reason I'm asking is because for a lot of the Democratic base that's watching this process play out, I think the flip side of that is, like, yes, you can have this specific win that would be extremely substantive because, like you said, I mean, 80% of premiums going up as much as 80% is a massive hit to Americans, even beyond the 17 million Americans who are going to lose their health coverage via these Medicaid cuts. But at the same time, there is a large faction of people who say Democrats shouldn't give a vote on anything because other than that minor, narrow win that you could etch on ACA subsidies, that you're really just funding the rest of Trump's agenda. And that includes ICE. That includes, like, everything that we're seeing right now. And so how do you reconcile those two things where you are still, in a way, like in a vacuum, and I know this is a reductive way to think of it, but in a vacuum, you are still funding the rest of his agenda, even though you might be able to notch a narrow win?
Yeah, I mean, this has been the challenge of this shutdown strategy from the very beginning, is that on one hand, you have Democrats doing what you and I and others have called them to do, which is to call out Trump's efforts to become an authoritarian, masked ICE agents, illegal arrests, prosecutions, all of that, and say democracy is on the line. And so we are not going to fund the government. And in exchange for that, we want an extension of a tax credit, right? Like, there is a dissonance there. Now, the challenge is, if you're going to do this seriously, you're not just going to pitch a fit and say, we're just not going to fund the government forever, because that will come at a cost. That comes at a cost to people. Will be hurt by that. Federal government employees who we've been fighting to try to help, through DOGE and everything else, will lose their jobs for however long the shutdown goes, and maybe permanently if Russ vote no and B are able to do what they think they want to do, with no guarantee of back pay for the people who do come back. And so, how are you going to go? Are you going to go into this with a plan to get out? Right. That's the question for, like, how serious people do this. I find the whole thing very unsatisfactory in a lot of ways. I would not, if it had been up to me, I would not have picked the Obamacare premiums as the one thing we were asking for. Yeah.
What would you have picked?
I would have done. Yeah, I think there are two other options here, and I will explain why I think they went down this path, to be fair to them. But one option is, don't make any specific demands. Make the argument you just made, which is we're not going to fund. We're doing this because we cannot, in good conscience, vote to fund this government doing what it's doing. We just cannot do it. Now, that raises the question of how you get out of it, but then that gives you a very wide deal space of things you could possibly agree to. The second option would be to make this about affordability writ large and include the tariffs in there. So do tariffs. You do the healthcare stuff in there and try to say, we're going to use this moment of great attention, right? We potentially have the country paying attention. We're going to focus on what is Trump's weakest area, which is cost of living, inflation, what he's done to raise prices, including the tariffs. And so, like, that, those have been the two options I found better than this one. But ultimately, the reason they probably came to this is the only way a shutdown strategy works is you keep everyone unified. So what's the thing that keeps Jared Golden to AOC unified? What keeps Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren to Alyssa Slotkin and Jeanne Shaheen unified? It's healthcare. I think that's how we end up here.
Could you talk a little bit about what powers Trump would be able to consolidate if we're in a situation where there is a shutdown and there is no check on what he's able to do?
The courts will play a large role in how this works. There's something called the Anti-Deficiency Act, and I worked in the White House during a shutdown, and we met with all the lawyers. We had all these discussions about what are the things that you cannot spend you cannot do without government funding. There are some things that are excluded, like Social Security and Medicare, national security, military, law enforcement, those sorts of things. But there are a bunch of other programs that are not seen as essential, or people who are not deemed essential employees. And so, but ultimately, the president and the OMB director get to decide, make those decisions about whether something is essential or not, or violates the Anti-Deficiency Act or not. And someone could sue and ask the court to stop them from doing it. But absent that, Trump does have broad discretion to decide what stays open and what doesn't.
So in a way, I mean, that objective, even though giving votes to a Republican budget feels like capitulation, it is in effect still less of a capitulation than giving Trump full control over what he wants to do with the entire government by virtue of kind of taking yourself out of the equation completely, right?
Yeah, I mean that was ultimately Chuck Schumer's argument against the shutdown in May. I think at some point you have to say enough is enough and take the one moment of leverage you have and try to use it to both grab the nation's attention and then try to actually extract something. Because ultimately, we can say who's shutting down what, or this ridiculous blame game where everyone's trying to say, well, I had called the meeting and then Trump didn't come to the meeting and now we had a meeting and Mike Johnson won't bring the people back. Here's all you really need to know about this, which is Republicans need Democratic votes to keep the government open. They're unwilling to compromise or offer anything in exchange for those Democratic votes. And so that sort of obstinance is what has put us in that position. And so Democrats are saying, why would we do this in exchange for nothing, right? Because on the current path we're on, we're going to close a whole bunch of rural hospitals. We're going to kick a whole bunch of people off Medicaid. And at the end of this year, a bunch of people's premiums are going to skyrocket. Because if you want our support to do this very basic act of governing, which is to keep the government open, then you need to give us something for it. And here's what we're asking for.
A quick note for everybody watching, before we get into the next question here, if you're not yet subscribed to Pod Save America's YouTube channel, I'm going to put that link in the post description of this video. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. It's a great way to support independent media. It's a great way to support Dan and his work. So again, if you're not yet subscribed, both to Pod Save America and to this channel, I'll put the links to both of those in the post description. So go ahead and subscribe. Dan, I'm going to ask a very political question, all on the morality stuff aside. If we are careening toward a situation where because of Trump's policies, directly because of Trump's policies, and Republicans control the White House, the House, and the Senate, and premiums are set to rise as much as 80%, is there a world where Democrats say, go ahead, allow these Republicans to do what they want to do and then suffer the consequences for it? Is there, in a weird way, it's like Democrats are protecting Republicans from themselves and kind of helping the Republicans electorally speaking?
Well, I think in that scenario, Democrats should not take a half measure on this. This should not be some we're going to lower the premiums by X amount and we're going to means test them and they're going to expire in 9 months or all of that. I think you have to ask for something real. Ultimately, we're in the business of trying. We do this to try to help make people's lives better. And if we can use the leverage we have here to make 15 million people's lives better by making their healthcare more affordable, we should do that. Also, we have a long-term stake as liberals and progressives in this country in the success of the Affordable Care Act. And so this is a critical part of that success. And if it gets turned off, who knows when it comes back on, right? We will need a trifecta to turn it back on. And, that may be years from now. And so I think we have real incentive to try to get this done. I don't think we should take any measure or even a half measure, but yes, Republicans will pay a price for that. They've already raised all the other costs. And I'm just not maybe I'm a sucker in this world, but it was up to me. I'd not be willing to let 15 million people pay more for healthcare, just on the chance that people will make Republicans pay the price in November.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And so then to that point, how do you message it in such a way where Republicans don't then usurp all the credit for something that Democrats used what little leverage they have to force them to do?
Yeah, I think that this one should be pretty easy. They've been trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act for a decade now, 15 years now, whatever it's been. So that's easy to do. And also, Trump has done such a piss poor job on prices and inflation that we are not going to lose the high side of the cost of living argument if we solve this problem, right? Tariffs are jacking cost up, grocery prices are at record highs. Everyone is talking about it. If you ask voters what is they know most about Trump's presidency, it's tariffs. Like, I don't think we lose the I don't think they're going to get a lot of credit for doing this, and I don't think we're going to lose the argument if we do solve the problem.
To that end, there is new reporting from Morning Consult, but other polling firms as well. But the Morning Consult poll shows that by a 13-point margin, voters would blame the Republican Party, who again controls the House and the Senate and the White House, for a government shutdown. And among independent voters, there is a 17-point gap that would blame Republicans over Democrats. And so how are you thinking about that polling? What should Democrats be doing right now to make sure that they can retain that edge or even grow it?
I think so. We've seen there's a Navigator poll and some other polling that shows the same thing. And this tells us a couple of things. One of which is something that I think most people in politics seem to forget, which is Trump is very unpopular, right? He's an unpopular president, pushing an unpopular agenda and getting horrendous ratings on people's most critical issue, inflation. And so the coverage of this shutdown going into it is Trump is very strong and Democrats are weak, and Schumer is getting dragged to this to avoid a primary in 2028, and the base is forcing him to do it. The reality is that Trump does not come into this in a particularly strong position, and neither do Republicans. Both because of the poll you mentioned, and then just going forward, like Trump is the paradox of Trump's presidency is that he's a substantively powerful person who is historically weak politically, and this is like winning a shutdown means persuading the country of your case, and he is not very good at persuading anyone other than his base. I think the thing here to do is I do not want to go down this rabbit hole of who gets quote unquote blame. That is an inside Washington game. That's something you should do in your private phone calls with like Jake Sherman and Politico. What you should do is say, we are the ones fighting to lower your healthcare costs. The Republicans won't do it. Like, we need to show middle and working class families in this country that we will fight for them to make their prices lower, to make their healthcare cheaper. And that is ultimately what victory will look like. If we are on the high side of that argument, I do think that we will win the politics of the shutdown.
Okay, so now that we've done basically the full interview on the shutdown,
yep.
Just a broader question here, 30,000-foot view question. Yeah. Is this something that you even think is that you think is worth talking about, given the fact that Americans have such a limited appetite, like that we have such a limited aperture to gain people's attention, that we know the shutdown is not one of the principal issues that people are talking about right now. And so when doing content, when talking to people, how are you thinking about the fact that the shutdown is a very inside Washington thing on one hand, but on the other side is going to have major consequences, major ramifications if it actually goes through? Like, how do you reconcile those two things that are seemingly in conflict?
When you look at the polling right now, it looks like a lot of people aren't paying that much attention to the shutdown. That's going to change at midnight Tuesday night when the government's actually shut down, and thousands of federal workers will be laid off. There will be longer lines at airports because there'll be fewer TSA people working. National parks are going to close most likely if Trump actually follows the rules set by previous administrations. Museums will close. People will call the government for like education funding, other things, and no one will answer the phone. Like, people will notice when it happens. And I think I don't think there's a world in which you can't talk about it. Like, you absolutely have to talk about it. But I think the thing here for us as Democrats and as progressives and as people who do content and are trying to influence public opinion is that what we want to do is show people that we are fighting for lower costs. Like, that's what this is about. That's what the shutdown is about. We don't have to be monotone, attached to one topic only. Like, Trump's going to do some terrible stuff. Maybe he'll charge another political opponent. We can talk about that too. But one of the challenges that Democrats have had in 2025 is we've been very bad at making our messaging on the economy and inflation in particular go viral. We just cannot get people's attention. We're pretty good at getting their attention about all the other bad stuff Trump's doing, Epstein files, ICE raids, Jimmy Kimmel banishing or whatever else.
Yeah.
But with the exception of Zoran Mondani, no Democrat has had any real success breaking through on affordability. And this is a chance to do that, and we should do it aggressively.
One more reminder for everybody who's watching, if you are not yet subscribed on YouTube to Pod Save America's YouTube channel, I'm going to put the link on this screen and also in the post description of this video. And if you want to hear more from Dan, please subscribe to Messagebox. That's his newsletter. There is no better newsletter that exists than Messagebox if you're looking for a smart analysis. So I'll put that in the post description of this video as well. If you're not yet subscribed to both of those things, please go ahead and subscribe. Dan, as always, I appreciate your time.
Awesome, Brian. Good to talk to you.